Unlocking the Secrets of Tarot and Kabbalah. The story of the B.O.T.A. Mystery School. In the early 20th century, a great light of esoteric knowledge, once fiercely guarded in the secret lodges of Victorian England, was scattered to the winds. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a society of poets and magicians, had shattered, and from its fragments, a new generation of teachers would arise. One of those fragments was carried across an ocean, to the sun-drenched, forward-looking landscape of Southern California. There, in the burgeoning metropolis of Los Angeles, a new kind of mystery school would be born. It would not be a society for dramatic magical battles or flamboyant personalities. It would be a quiet, diligent, and enduring order, dedicated to the patient, methodical work of self-unfoldment. It claimed to be the true heir to the Golden Dawn's legacy, a school that taught the sacred sciences of tarot and Kabbalah not as tools for fortune-telling or power, but as a precise, psychological roadmap to the divine. They called themselves the builders of the atom, or B.O.T.A. This is the story of that quiet school, of its brilliant and determined founder, Paul Foster Case, and of how the secrets of the tarot were preserved, refined, and transmitted to a new world. To understand the birth of a new school, we must first understand the collapse of the old one. To find the origins of the builders of the atom, our story must begin not in the sunlit promise of 20th century California, but in the shadows and the ashes of a great magical fire in turn-of-the-century London. At the dawn of the 1900s, the undisputed center of the Western magical tradition was a single, secret, and astonishingly brilliant organization, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. For a brief, incandescent period, it was a secret academy of geniuses. It had gathered some of the most creative minds of the age, poets like W.B. Yeats, artists, scholars, and mystics, and it had given them a key. This key was a comprehensive, systematic curriculum of magic that, for the first time, wove together the scattered threads of Western esotericism, Kabbalah, alchemy, astrology, tarot, and ritual magic into a single, coherent, and workable whole. The Golden Dawn was a unified source of immense intellectual and spiritual light, but that light, concentrated in one place, proved to be too intense. The order was a crucible filled with powerful, ambitious, and fiercely individualistic personalities. And by the early years of the new century, that crucible had cracked. The story of the Golden Dawn's collapse is a human tragedy of ego, jealousy, and betrayal. The order's co-founder, MacGregor Mathers, ruling with an increasingly autocratic hand from his self-imposed exile in Paris, came into open conflict with the senior adepts of the London Temple, who were tired of his tyranny. The notorious magician Aleister Crowley, a brilliant but disruptive force, acted as the catalyst, siding with Mathers and attempting to seize control of the London Temple in a bizarre confrontation that involved locksmiths, lawsuits, and astral curses. The result was a catastrophic schism. The unified order shattered. The fellowship was broken. The great light was not extinguished, but it was diffracted, scattered into a dozen competing fragments. In the years that followed, the legacy of the Golden Dawn was carried on by a host of smaller, rival successor groups, each claiming to be the one true heir. In London, many of the original adepts, including Yeats, tried to hold their temple together, first restructuring it as the Morgenroth, but the internal squabbles and the disillusionment over the order's forged origins proved fatal, and it soon faded. Another prominent London member, the scholar A.E. Waite, broke away to form his own independent and rectified rite, rewriting the rituals to emphasize Christian mysticism over practical magic. Across the Channel in Paris, MacGregor Mathers continued to preside over his own dwindling faction, which he named the Alpha Et Omega. After his death, his formidable widow, Moina Mathersa, gifted artist and seer in her own right, took control, attempting to maintain her husband's legacy and guard what she saw as the only pure and authorized transmission of the Golden Dawn's teachings. Yet another major splinter group was the Stella Matutina, or Morning Star. This order, led by a man named Dr. Robert Felkin, also claimed a direct Golden Dawn lineage and was, for a time, quite successful, even establishing temples as far away as New Zealand. The great secret society had become a fractured family, its children all squabbling over a contested inheritance. The teachings, once so carefully guarded by oaths of secrecy, were now being altered, reinterpreted, and in the case of Aleister Crowley's publications, deliberately exposed to the public. And as the light scattered across Europe, its fragments began to cross the ocean. The ideas, the rituals, and the personnel of the Golden Dawn tradition began to arrive in America. The New World, with its vibrant culture of spiritual seeking and its lack of an entrenched aristocracy or state church, was fertile ground for these esoteric seeds. Theosophy had already established a powerful presence. New Thought, with its focus on the power of positive thinking, was gaining millions of adherents. And now, the complex, ceremonial magic of the Golden Dawn began to find a foothold. Emissaries from the European splinter groups, like Dr. Felkin of the Stella Matutina, traveled to the United States to establish new temples. Charters were issued. Lodges were founded in cities like New York and Boston. The American esoteric scene was becoming a vibrant, if often confusing, marketplace of spiritual ideas. It was a world of immense possibility, where the scattered fragments of old European traditions could be gathered, re-examined, and perhaps reassembled into something new. Into this dynamic and chaotic world of scattered light and new beginnings, a young man from the provincial city of Rochester, New York, was about to step. He was not a rebellious prophet like Crowley, nor a romantic poet like Yeats. He was a quiet, diligent, and deeply methodical musician, a man whose unique mind was perfectly suited to find the hidden harmony within the esoteric chaos of his time. His life's work would be to gather the most potent fragments of the Golden Dawn's wisdom, the Kabbalah, and the Tarot, and to build them into a new, more durable, and more accessible temple. His name was Paul Foster Case. Paul Foster Case would become a bridge between the old world and the new. He would receive his initiation in a direct line from one of the original Golden Dawn splinter groups, mastering its complex system. But he would not be content to merely preserve the tradition. He would seek to purify it, to correct it, to strip it down to its essential scientific core. He believed that the Golden Dawn, for all its genius, had made errors. And he believed that he, through his own deep study and, he claimed, through contact with his own inner teachers, had been given the key to correct those errors. His journey would lead him from the heart of the American esoteric establishment to a painful break with his own magical order. It was a journey that would ultimately allow him to become not just a keeper of the flame, but a builder of a new kind of adytum, a new and quiet holy of holies for the modern age. The man who would build a new temple for the ageless wisdom was not, by nature, a revolutionary. He was a builder, a harmonizer, a man whose entire life was defined by a search for the underlying structure, the hidden patterns that govern both art and the soul. Paul Foster Case was born in 1884 in the small town of Fairport, New York. His father was the town librarian and a congregational church deacon, and from his earliest days, Case was immersed in a world of books and quiet, intellectual piety. His first and most public calling was music. He was a child prodigy on the violin. By the time he was a young man, he had moved to New York City and established a successful career as a celebrated violinist and an acclaimed conductor of orchestras. His entire world was steeped in the principles of harmony, of rhythm, of counterpoint, of the precise mathematical relationships that transform mere sound into profound emotion. This musical training would prove to be the perfect foundation for his life's other great passion. For alongside his career as a musician, Case was a secret, and deeply serious, student of the occult. His journey began, as it did for many in his generation, with an exploration of Eastern thought. He devoured the works of figures like Swami Vivekananda, who had introduced Vedanta and yoga to the West at the 1893 World's Parliament of Religions. He was particularly influenced by the writings of Yogi Ramakarakath, pen name of the American occultist William Walker Atkinson, whose books on yogic philosophy and mental powers were hugely popular. But his focus soon shifted to the Western esoteric tradition. He began to study the foundational texts of modern occultism, and his sharp, analytical mind was drawn to the great 19th-century French magus, Eliphas Levi. It was from Levi that he first encountered the idea that would become the cornerstone of his life's work: the profound, intimate, and systematic connection between the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet and the 22 major arcana cards of the tarot. For Case, this was a revelation. It suggested that the tarot was not just a tool for fortune-telling, but a complete, symbolic alphabet of cosmic and psychological forces. It was the visual Kabbalah. His studies continued in private for years, until a fateful encounter in 1907. He met a prominent American occultist named Michael Whitty. Whitty was not just a scholar. He was the premonstrator or chief instructor of a genuine, active temple of one of the most important Golden Dawn successor groups, the Thoth Hermes Temple of the Alpha Et Omega. This was the American branch of the order still being run by MacGregor Mathers and his widow Moyna from Europe. For Case, this was a chance to move from theoretical study to practical initiatory work. Case was initiated into the order, taking the magical motto Frater Perseverantia, Brother Perseverance. It was a name that would perfectly define his character. He had found his spiritual home. The Golden Dawn system, with its grand, elegant synthesis of Kabbalah, tarot, astrology, and ritual, appealed directly to his musician's soul. He saw the Kabbalistic tree of life not as a dry, abstract diagram, but as a living, cosmic musical scale, a keyboard of consciousness. The 10 Sephirot were the fundamental tones, and the 22 paths were the intervals that connected them, creating the harmonies of the universe. He was a brilliant and exceptionally diligent student. He did not just perform the rituals. He analyzed them, dissected them, sought to understand their every symbolic nuance. He quickly rose through the grades of the outer order, his deep understanding of the complex system impressing even the order's senior leadership back in Britain. By 1918, a decade after his initiation, Paul Foster Case had succeeded his old teacher, Michael Whitty, and had become the premonstrator of the entire Thoth-Hermes Temple in New York. He was now one of the most senior adepts in America. But as his authority grew, so did his intellectual and spiritual independence. He was no longer content to simply be a custodian of the old Golden Dawn teachings. He began to see what he believed were flaws, inconsistencies, and even deliberate blinds within the system he had inherited. His scholarly mind, trained in the precision of musical theory, was bothered by what he saw as errors in the Golden Dawn's attributions. He believed, for instance, that the order had incorrectly swapped the positions of two cards in the tarot trump strength and justice and their corresponding Hebrew letters. He began a massive project of research, using the Kabbalistic science of Gematria and esoteric system of numerology to prove his case and restore what he believed to be the correct, original order. He also grew deeply uncomfortable with certain aspects of the order's magical practice. He became particularly wary of the complex system of Enochian magic, a system of communicating with angelic beings that was a cornerstone of the Golden Dawn's advanced work. Case came to believe that this system, while powerful, was psychically dangerous, unbalanced, and had been the source of the ego-driven conflicts that had destroyed the original order. He began to quietly de-emphasize it in his own teachings. His most important innovation, however, was his elevation of the tarot. For the Golden Dawn, the tarot was one important tool among many. For Case, the tarot was the central key. It was the Book of Thoth, the Book of Tokens, a complete, sequential, and perfect textbook of initiation. He believed that the 22 cards of the major arcana were a pictorial map of the entire path of spiritual unfoldment, from the unmanifest potential of the fool to the cosmic consciousness of the world. He began to write his own, far more detailed lessons on the tarot, ones that went far beyond the original Golden Dawn knowledge lectures. He created a revised version of the tarot deck, meticulously correcting the symbolism and color schemes to align perfectly with his understanding of Kabbalah and esoteric astrology. These were bold and radical revisions, and they raised a critical question. Where was this new knowledge coming from? Case's answer would be the one that would lead to his final, decisive break with his own magical order. The story, as it is traditionally told within B.O.T.A, is this: around 1920, the leadership of the Alpha Et Omega in Britain, particularly Moina Mathers, became aware of the depth and originality of the material Case was teaching in New York. She became concerned. She contacted him and demanded to know the source of his knowledge. He was, in her view, teaching things that were not part of the official curriculum that had been handed down by her late husband. Case, a man of deep personal integrity, answered honestly. He explained that while his work was based on the foundation he had received from the order, his deepest and most important insights were not coming from its papers. He claimed that he had made contact, on the inner planes, with a genuine master of the wisdom. He said he was in direct psychic communication with a teacher who was guiding his work of restoring the esoteric sciences. He referred to this teacher simply as the master of the temple. For Moina Mathers, this was an act of supreme rebellion. In her worldview, there was only one legitimate source of authority for the order's teachings: her husband, Samuel Liddell McGregor Mathers. Any claim of independent, inner-plane contact was a dangerous delusion at best, and a fraudulent attempt to usurp her authority at worst. She had seen what had happened with Aleister Crowley's claims of contact with Iwas, and she would not tolerate another rogue adept. She issued an ultimatum to her American premonstrator. He must choose. He must either cease all of his independent teachings and renounce his supposed communication with his secret chief, submitting completely to her authority, or he must resign from the order. Paul Foster Case, the quiet musician, the persevering scholar, was faced with an impossible choice: loyalty to the institution that had given him his initiation, or loyalty to the inner voice that he believed was guiding him to a deeper truth. He chose the inner voice. In 1922, Paul Foster Case, one of the most brilliant adepts the Golden Dawn tradition had ever produced, either resigned or was expelled from the Alpha Et Omega. The break was complete. He was now alone, but he was also free. He was free to take the knowledge he had spent a lifetime mastering and build something new. A temple built not on the shifting sands of personal authority, but on the solid, impersonal rock of the ageless wisdom itself. To be cast out of a secret society is, for most, an end. It is an excommunication, a severing from the source of one's knowledge and community. But for Paul Foster Case, his break with the Alpha Et Omega in 1922 was not an end. It was a liberation. He was now free from the dogma, the secrecy for secrecy's sake, and the personality politics that had plagued the dying Golden Dawn tradition. He was free to build. He was no longer just a custodian of a received tradition. He was now the architect of a new one, His goal was to construct a new kind of mystery school, one that would preserve the pure, essential science of the ageless wisdom, but would present it in a form suited for the modern world. He would take the powerful engine of the Golden Dawn's curriculum and place it in a new, more durable and more accessible vehicle. His first step was to gather a small group of his most loyal students in New York City. He initially founded an informal organization he called the School of Ageless Wisdom. But his vision was already looking west, towards the new cultural and spiritual frontier of America. In the early 1920s, he made the fateful decision to move to Los Angeles. Los Angeles in the 1920s was a city of reinvention. It was a magnet for seekers of all kinds: health gurus, utopian thinkers, spiritual leaders, and esotericists. It was a place where new ideas could take root, far from the rigid social and intellectual structures of the East Coast and Europe. It was the perfect soil in which to plant the seed of a new kind of mystery school. It was here that Case formally incorporated his new organization. And he chose for it a name that was profoundly symbolic, a name that perfectly encapsulated its purpose and its philosophy. The Builders of the Atom, a name that would become known to its students around the world by its acronym, B.O.T.A. Let us break down this name, for it contains the entire blueprint of the school's mission. An adytum is a Greek word. It means the inner shrine, the holy of holies, the most sacred, innermost part of a temple, a place not to be entered by the uninitiated public. In the context of the school, the adytum is not a physical place. It is the sacred, divine center that exists within every human being. It is the inner temple of the soul, the point of direct connection with the one universal consciousness. The builders, then, are those who are actively and consciously engaged in the work of constructing this inner temple. The name implies a process. It is not about receiving a sudden, unearned flash of enlightenment. It is about slow, patient, methodical work. It is the work of a craftsman, a mason, carefully laying stone upon stone, building a structure within the personality through which the light of the inner shrine can shine. The very name of the school defined its path. It was a path of practical, spiritual construction. The structure of this new school was just as revolutionary as its name. Case had experienced firsthand the limitations and the dangers of the old secret society model. The Golden Dawn and its descendants were initiatory lodges. Membership was exclusive, by invitation only. The teachings were transmitted orally, in secret, during elaborate and dramatic physical ceremonies held in a physical temple. This model, Case believed, was inherently flawed. It fostered secrecy for its own sake, it was geographically limited, and it inevitably led to ego-driven power struggles over who had the authority to perform the rituals and lead the lodge. Case envisioned a different way. A way to democratize the ageless wisdom without diluting its power. He would take the core teachings, the esoteric science of the Golden Dawn, and he would remove them from the confines of the secret lodge room. He would present them in their entirety through a meticulously designed series of mail-order correspondence courses. This was a radical and brilliant innovation. It was the application of a modern, American method of distance learning to the ancient science of the soul. Now, any sincere seeker, no matter where they lived in the world, no matter their social standing, could apply for membership. If accepted, they could receive the complete, graded curriculum of lessons, mailed directly to their home in plain, discreet envelopes. The temple was no longer a building in Los Angeles or New York. The temple was now the curriculum itself. The initiation was no longer a dramatic ceremony performed by robed officers. The true initiation was the student's own, private, dedicated work with the lessons. The teacher was no longer a charismatic premonstrator in a lodge. The true teacher, Case insisted, was the one teacher, the divine spirit, the master of the temple, speaking directly to the student through the symbolic language of the lessons themselves. The curriculum Case designed was a masterful work of distillation and clarification. He took the often veiled, complex, and sometimes confusing knowledge papers of the Golden Dawn and rewrote them with a new clarity, a new psychological depth, and a new emphasis. He stripped away the elements he considered to be non-essential or dangerous. The complex and risky Enochian angel magic was gone. The emphasis on astral travel for its own sake was gone. The focus shifted away from the acquisition of psychic powers or phenomena, which he saw as a dangerous sidetrack that could inflate the ego. Instead, the B.O.T.A. curriculum focused with laser-like precision on what Case saw as the twin pillars, the absolute scientific foundation of the entire Western esoteric tradition, the Holy Kabbalah and the Sacred Tarot. The Kabbalah, he taught, was the blueprint. The Tree of Life was the definitive map of both the macrocosm universe and its laws and the microcosm, the human consciousness and its structure. It was the divine geometry of reality. The Tarot, he taught, was the instruction manual for the blueprint. The 78 cards were a complete, symbolic textbook of the forces and states of consciousness represented on the Tree of Life. They were the keys to unlocking the map. The students' work was to slowly and patiently absorb this knowledge. They would progress through a series of graded lessons, starting with the very basics and building, step by step, to the most profound concepts. The core of the work was practical. Students were not just expected to read, they were expected to do. They were taught specific techniques of meditation. They were taught the vital practice of coloring their own tarot deck, a powerful method for impressing the symbols deep into the subconscious mind. And they were taught how to use the tarot and the tree of life as tools for daily self-analysis and spiritual development. The goal was clear and it was stated plainly. It was not about becoming a powerful magician who could command spirits. It was about becoming a more balanced, more integrated, and more illuminated human being. It was about building a personality that could serve as a clear and unobstructed channel for the light of the higher self, the light from the inner adytum. This was the promise and the work of the builders of the adytum. Part 4. The Unveiled Tarot. For centuries, the tarot has been a ghost at the feast of Western culture. A deck of strange, beautiful, and enigmatic images. It has been used by fortune-tellers in darkened parlors, dismissed by skeptics as a mere game of chance, and puzzled over by scholars. Its true origins are lost to the mists of time. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn had made a crucial first step in rescuing the tarot from this obscurity. They had recognized it as a key component of the Western mystery tradition and had systematically linked it to the Kabbalah. But it was Paul Foster Case who would take this key and use it to unlock the very central chamber of the adytum. His most important and lasting legacy was his profound and systematic unveiling of what he believed to be the tarot's true purpose. For Case, the tarot was not a tool for predicting the future. To use it for fortune-telling, he taught, was a profanation of the mysteries. Its true purpose was far grander. It was a complete, pictorial textbook of spiritual science, a visual map of the human consciousness, and a practical tool for consciously directing one's own evolution. Case's work began with an act of meticulous, scholarly correction. He believed that the Golden Dawn, for all its genius, had made several critical errors in its understanding of the tarot, errors that threw the entire system slightly out of harmony. Like a master musician retuning a magnificent but flawed instrument, he set about correcting these blinds. His most famous correction involved the numbering and attribution of two major arcana cards. The Golden Dawn, following the French occultist Eliphas Levi, had placed the card of justice at number 8 and strength at number 11. Case, through deep meditation and his complex work with Gematria Kabbalistic system of numerology, became convinced this was wrong. He argued that the original, traditional ordering was correct. Strength should be number 8, corresponding to the Hebrew letter Taith, and justice should be number 11, corresponding to the letter Lamed. This was not a minor academic quibble. In a system built on precise correspondences, this change sent ripples through the entire structure, altering the relationships between the paths on the tree of life and creating what he saw as a more perfect, harmonious alignment. He was not just rearranging cards. He was retuning the universe. He also undertook the massive project of creating his own version of the tarot deck. He believed that the popular Rider-Waite-Smith deck, designed by his fellow Golden Dawn alumni, while artistically brilliant, had been deliberately altered by A.E. Waite to reflect a more Christian, mystical, and less magical worldview. Case sought to create a deck that was a pure, unadulterated expression of esoteric science. The B.O.T.A tarot is stark, black and white, designed not for aesthetic beauty, but for absolute symbolic accuracy. It is a deck designed to be a tool for work. And work is the operative word. The B.O.T.A curriculum made the tarot a central and practical discipline. The first great task of a student was to color their own deck. This was a profound act of magical and psychological immersion. Case, drawing on the color theories of the Golden Dawn, developed a complex and precise system of color scales. Each path on the tree of life, and therefore each tarot key, had 4 different corresponding colors, representing its nature in the 4 Kabbalistic worlds of spirit, mind, emotion, and matter. The student was given this color key and was instructed to meticulously color in each of the 22 major arcana cards. This was far more than an art project. It was a powerful meditative practice. By spending hours carefully applying the correct, vibrant colors to the archetypal designs, the student was doing several things at once. They were learning the complex system of correspondences in a deep, intuitive way. They were focusing their will and attention, a fundamental magical skill. And most importantly, they were impressing these potent, archetypal symbols directly into the fabric of their own subconscious mind. They were, in a very real sense, building the keys into their own consciousness. Once the deck was colored, it became the student's primary tool for self-exploration. Case's great psychological insight was to interpret the tarot keys not as external forces, but as maps of internal human faculties. The magician, Key 1, represents not a wizard in a pointy hat, but the self-conscious mind itself, the seat of attention, concentration, and will. The tools on his table are the fundamental powers of the personality. The high priestess, Key 2, represents the subconscious mind, the great storehouse of memory, intuition, and the link to the collective unconscious. She is the guardian of the inner temple. The Empress, Key 3, is creative imagination, the power of the subconscious to generate new forms and ideas. The Emperor, Key 4, is the faculty of reason, the power that orders, classifies, and gives structure to the products of imagination. And so it continues through all 22 keys. Each card is a detailed symbolic lesson on a specific aspect of human consciousness and its relationship to the cosmic laws of the universe. To meditate on a card is to awaken and come into contact with that specific power within oneself. The tarot, in Case's hands, became a complete system of spiritual psychology, a way of mapping and ultimately integrating all the disparate parts of the self. The practical work went even further. Students were taught specific meditative techniques to activate the power of the keys. They would learn to build the cube of space, a complex visualization based on the ancient Kabbalistic text, the Sefer Yetzirah, which associates the Hebrew letters with the 6 directions of space. They were taught the art of vibration, a technique inherited from the Golden Dawn, where the student learns to chant the divine names, angelic names, and Hebrew letters associated with each card. This was not just speaking the words. It was a method of using sound to cause the entire body and the subtle energy centers to resonate with a specific cosmic frequency, thereby attuning the practitioner to the force represented by the card. Through this slow, patient, and methodical work, coloring, meditation, vibration, and intellectual study, the tarot was transformed. It was no longer a deck of cardboard images. It became a living, dynamic interface between the individual's consciousness and the archetypal forces of the universe. It was a set of keys that could unlock the doors of perception, a tool for consciously building the inner adytum. This was the great unveiling of the tarot that Paul Foster Case offered to the world. He took a mysterious and often misunderstood artifact and revealed it as a precise, scientific, and profoundly psychological tool for the great work, the conscious acceleration of human evolution. Part 5: The Adytum and its Builders. A school is more than just the vision of its founder. For it to survive, it must be built into an institution, a living vessel capable of carrying the teachings forward through time. Paul Foster Case had laid the foundation, he had drawn the blueprint, and he had written the curriculum. For 3 decades, he dedicated his life to the slow, patient work of building his adytum. He led the school, refined the lessons, and corresponded with students from around the globe, guiding them through the intricate mysteries of tarot and Kabbalah. His leadership was a stark contrast to the autocratic and often chaotic styles of his Golden Dawn predecessors like Mathers and Crowley. Case was a teacher, not a messiah. He governed with a quiet, scholarly authority, always pointing his students not towards his own personality, but back towards the impersonal, objective principles of the ageless wisdom. He was building an organization designed to outlast him. As his health began to fail in the early 1950s, Case knew he needed to ensure the continuity of the work. He had spent years training a successor, a woman of great spiritual insight and formidable intellect who had become his closest collaborator. Her name was Anne Davies. When Paul Foster Case died in 1954, the leadership of the builders of the adytum passed seamlessly to her. And Davies was not merely a caretaker. She was a genuine esotericist in her own right, and she would become the second great architect of B.O.T.A. She took the vast and sometimes dense body of work that Case had created and made it more accessible. She recorded a series of lectures on the lessons, her warm, clear voice guiding students through the complex material. She traveled and lectured publicly, bringing a new level of visibility to the school's quiet work. Under Anne Davies's leadership, which lasted until her own death in 1975, B.O.T.A. solidified its unique identity and culture. It was a culture that stood in stark opposition to the often sensationalist and personality-driven world of 20th century occultism. The first principle of this culture was anonymity. B.O.T.A. does not advertise. It does not proselytize. It does not seek the spotlight. It has always operated on the principle that when a student is truly ready for the teachings, a way will be found for them to make contact. Its growth has been slow, quiet, and organic, relying on word of mouth and the sincere searching of individuals. The leaders of the order, known as Prolocutors General, are not public figures or charismatic gurus. They are administrators and teachers, their role to facilitate the student's own connection to the one true teacher, the inner self. The second principle was accessibility. By structuring itself as a correspondence school, B.O.T.A removed the geographical and social barriers that had defined the old mystery schools. A student did not have to live in London or Paris. They did not need a personal invitation from a high-ranking adept. They simply had to have a mailbox, a sincere desire to learn, and the self-discipline to do the work. This democratic approach made the deep teachings of the Western esoteric tradition available to a global audience on an unprecedented scale. The third, and perhaps most important principle was a focus on service. The goal of the great work in B.O.T.A is not just personal enlightenment for its own sake. The builders are taught that as they construct their own inner temple, as they bring more light and harmony into their own lives, they are not working for themselves alone. They are creating a vibratory pattern, a center of light, that positively affects the entire collective consciousness of humanity. The ultimate purpose of building the personal atom is to contribute to the construction of a larger, planetary one. While the core of the work remained the solitary study of the correspondence courses, Case and Davies also established a framework for group activity. For students who wished to connect with others, B.O.T.A created a network of study groups around the world. These were not initiatory lodges in the Golden Dawn sense, but voluntary gatherings where members could discuss the lessons, practice together, and offer mutual support. For those who progressed through the curriculum, there was also the opportunity to participate in group ritual work. But this work, too, was different. It was less about dramatic, initiatory theater, and more about practical, collective magic aimed at healing and spiritual service. Members could participate in the Flower of Life Healing Circle, a ritual practice where the group collectively builds a pattern of light and directs its healing energy towards those in need, whether they be individuals, communities, or the planet itself. And for more advanced students, there is the work of the pronaos, a term for the outer court of a temple. In pronaos ritual, members take on the roles of the officers in a symbolic temple, representing the forces of the tree of life. They perform rituals that are designed not to initiate new members, but to generate and channel spiritual and healing energy for the benefit of the world. It is a form of magical service, a way for the builders to work together as a collective magical engine. Through all the spiritual fads and occult revivals of the 20th and 21st centuries, the builders of the atom has endured. It has remained a quiet, steady, and unassuming presence. It has faced its own internal challenges and schisms, as all human organizations do. But it has largely avoided the public scandals, the personality cults, and the dramatic collapses that have plagued so many other esoteric orders. Its headquarters, a modest building on a quiet street in Los Angeles, is not the mysterious chateau or the Gothic abbey of esoteric fantasy. It is a functional office, a library, a small temple, and the center of a global mailing operation. It is a testament to the school's focus on substance over show. The influence of B.O.T.A is therefore subtle, but it is deep and wide. It may not have the public name recognition of Theosophy, or the dark, romantic allure of Aleister Crowley's Thelema, but its meticulously constructed lessons have been the secret, foundational education for thousands of serious students of the Western mysteries. It has been the quiet, hidden well from which countless tarot readers, Kabbalists, and modern magicians have drawn their first, and often their deepest, drink of the ageless wisdom. Paul Foster Case and Davies were not building an empire. They were building a temple, and it is a temple that has proven to be remarkably, quietly, and enduringly strong. And so, we arrive at the final question. In the noisy, chaotic, and often spectacular history of 20th century occultism, what is the ultimate legacy of Paul Foster Case and his quiet school, the builders of the atom? Theirs is not a story of scandalous headlines, charismatic prophets, or magical warfare. It is a story of patience, of scholarship, and of a different kind of power. It is a legacy, not of a raging fire, but of a quiet, steady, and enduring light. The builders of the atom are, perhaps, the truest and most direct heirs to the original, scholarly impulse that lay at the heart of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. While other descendants of that great order chased after public fame, devolved into personality cults, or simply faded into obscurity, B.O.T.A has, for a century, quietly and diligently focused on a single, unwavering mission: to preserve, to purify, and to transmit the essential practical science of the Western esoteric tradition. Paul Foster Case performed a great act of magical and intellectual restoration. He was a true builder. He took the scattered, broken, and sometimes corrupted fragments of the Golden Dawn's teachings, and he did what a master architect would do. He cleared away the rubble, the elements he saw as dangerous, superstitious, or non-essential, like the complex Enochian angel magic. He tested the foundations, using his deep knowledge of Kabbalah and Gematria to correct the system's structural flaws. And then, on that purified foundation, he rebuilt the temple. The temple he built was not for a select, invited few. It was for everyone. His decision to structure B.O.T.A as a correspondence school was a work of quiet genius. It was a profoundly democratic act that took the secret wisdom, once whispered only in guarded lodges, and made it accessible to any sincere individual with the price of a postage stamp and the discipline to do the work. He created a model that allowed the ageless wisdom to survive and flourish in the modern world. He was a new kind of esoteric teacher, one perfectly suited for the 20th century. He was not the romantic poet mage like his predecessor, W.B. Yeats. He was not the transgressive prophet beast like his contemporary, Aleister Crowley. He was the scholar-musician. He approached the great mysteries with the meticulous, analytical mind of an academic and the soul of an artist who understood that the deepest truths are often found not in noise and fury, but in the perfect, underlying harmony of things. His greatest legacy, the centerpiece of the B.O.T.A system, is the unveiled tarot. Case elevated the tarot from a fortune-telling curiosity or one tool among many, and revealed it as the Book of Tokens, the true, pictorial key to the entire Western esoteric tradition. He presented it as a precise instrument for psychological and spiritual development, a movable tree of life that was both a map of human consciousness and a practical means for transforming it. This psychological, scientific, and deeply practical approach to the tarot has profoundly influenced virtually all serious tarot study that has come after it. He taught his students not just to read the cards, but to build them, to color them, to meditate upon them, and ultimately to become them. The Builders of the Atom is the school that carries this legacy forward. It is a testament to a different kind of path. It is a path that values quiet, diligent work over dramatic display. It values personal experience over blind belief. It values spiritual service over the acquisition of personal power. And it values the slow, steady, methodical construction of an inner, sacred space over the fleeting drama of the outer world. The story of B.O.T.A is the story of a forgotten flame that did not seek to become a bonfire. It sought, instead, to become a pilot light, a small, protected, and perpetual flame that could be used by individual seekers to light their own inner lamps. In an occult history filled with shooting stars that burned brightly and then vanished, the Builders of the Atom is a quiet constellation, whose light has proven to be remarkably, enduringly, and peacefully constant. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of one of the 20th century's most enduring and influential mystery schools. The story of the Builders of the Atom is a powerful reminder that sometimes, the most lasting legacies are built not with a bang, but with a whisper. What are your thoughts on B.O.T.A and its approach to the tarot and Kabbalah? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoy these deep dives into the quiet and often hidden streams of esoteric history, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Driftwood Histories for more tales found adrift in time. We are grateful for your support. Until next time, stay curious.